Dr. Anna Prince, welcome to Europe Now.
Thank you for having me.
Ambassador, Germany in 2017, both regionally and globally, how is it faring? What is your take on Germany's contribution, both now specifically to the EU, but its broader role in global political affairs?
I think we have to concentrate to be strong in Europe in order to play our part globally too, because we are interested in a multipolar global scenery in order to safeguard peace. It's not good to have a monopoly of one or two big powers, and by now I think the concept of voices in international conferences has led to good results, so we try to pursue this, but of course we have to first have unity in Europe.
In the aftermath of Brexit, what do you think are the major challenges facing Germany in particular and the EU in general? And I ask that in the context of the many challenges that have been faced by Europe in recent times, from the global financial crisis, the migration challenge of 2015, terrorism, and on and on. Is Brexit one simple further challenge to be added to that list, or might it be, as some critics have suggested, a kind of tipping point now for the EU?
Mm-hmm. I don't think it is a tipping point. Maybe in another sense, because so far, if it comes to Europe, and be it a referendum, if you look at Ireland, or be it other votes, they were always more internally driven to criticize the government at an election or at a vote which was not considered to be so important. So I think maybe even in the Brexit case this was the case. Also a vote against Cameroon, or a vote to look back to the past. So I think there will be a certain period where people become more sober that this is really something important by now, and might maybe change in the future at the next elections or after the elections. We don't know, because we have seen a lot of surprises recently. We haven't expected Trump to win. We haven't expected Brexit. We haven't expected the fall of the wall. So let's see, and let's keep on going. If you look at Europe, I think there has even been a kind of consolidating effect with the rest of the members, because they also realize it is important. They don't want to be worse off. If you look at the southern members who might feel restrictions with immigration coming up and then would block the vote on Brexit. There's some tensions, but all of all, people start concentrating also now more on the benefits of the EU, which is a good sign.
I want to stick with this theme of challenges just a moment longer, because of course it's not simply Brexit. All the other earlier challenges I mentioned, but some more recent ones. I mean, since Brexit, 2017, according to many critics, has unleashed global political change of a new order. We're seeing the resurgence of various forms of populist right-wing nationalism across Europe. In the United States, of course, the new presidency, making America great again. Critics have pointed out that what we're in effect seeing perhaps is a wholesale shift away from forms of multilateralism towards unilateralism, a wholesale shift away from the kinds of global cosmopolitanism to which the EU, of course, has spoken up and been a key player within for so many years, away from that towards a kind of more nationalistic bent of our politics again. How can the EU effectively best respond to these challenges? And given that, on top of that, given that the EU has made multilateral cooperation and cosmopolitanism one of its central planks, in your opinion, is this still an effective means for political dialogue in the 21st century?
Mm-hmm. My perspective is, maybe it's my private opinion, that if you look around at countries that have growth, they are usually in favor of free trade because they can compete well. So it's more a reaction of, let's say, countries who feel they can't compete that well in a more and more globalized world. And in these countries, people who can't participate in the wealth that's added. We see this also in Germany, where you have people who feel that with further industrialization, they might lose their job, but they don't really know yet what will come next. They are used to very stable labor market, whereas the next generation will be used to having 2, 3, 4 different jobs and maybe don't work that long, but the experience isn't here yet. So to translate what the future will bring to people who maybe don't have the education to face it is very difficult.
In terms of the EU and the European project, Germany has been widely seen as a strong contributor to the idea of austerity, debt reduction, structural reform, whether this is from Angela Merkel or from Mr. Schulz. It's a position that's been quite a clear position from Germany, and I just wonder, against the tide of deglobalization or the resurgence of nationalism, this is a pathway that Germany feels very strongly about in terms of the future of the EU.
The consensus, I think, is there that, of course, if you have terrible debts, the state can't function anymore. How do you pay for all the public utilities or whatever has to be done if you're so indebted that you can't pay it anymore? You're broke. That's not the way. Of course, there's a lot of discussion in economics. How much austerity policy is still good, because public spending can help the economy in a phase where it's not growing. But the basic question is, what do people live on in the future? Do they have an industry? Do they have a service-oriented economy, tourism, whatever there is? And every country has to decide on that, what they want to do in the future to be able to earn a living. And they can't expect neither the EU to pay for it or other countries to pay for it. Somehow it has to be organized in a way that it's sustainable. And there's help for that from the European Union regional funds, for example. I've seen this in 2 postings in Europe where it was tremendously helpful in infrastructure projects.
Yeah, I mean, bringing in that broader human element, and still on the question of challenges, arguably nowhere more so have we seen those challenges than with the migration crisis. The veritable explosion that we've seen in enforced migration, asylum seekers arising from various political hotspots around the world. Now, the EU has made a major contribution here with its global compacts, and certainly Germany has been in the news for its very strong and focused position on what's occurred as a consequence of this crisis. But notwithstanding that, again, there have been critics pointing out that there are some European countries that have been sort of abrogating their responsibilities, so it's claimed. In the light of what we're now seeing unfold again in Syria and other political conflicts, what are your reflections on where we stand in 2017 in this wider frame that you've just mentioned about sustainability and populations, and of course the EU fundamental principle of freedom of mobility?
Mm-hmm. Within the EU, this is of course very important to safeguard. I think you see at that moment that the European Union doesn't have a government. It's a kind of compromise, and it's sometimes stressful and it's slower but durable, and that's the way we act. I think that's why the European Union only can react to a crisis. I wouldn't say that always governments can be proactive. They also react, but the EU even more so. So whenever there was a crisis, the EU became better. I'm very positive about that. If you look at the banking crisis, I think with the banking crisis it was very hard to swallow, but we managed, because otherwise there would have been a catastrophe now. So it's never recognized that it's done at the end, and people always ask for the best solution and think this could be implemented, which is politically naive. I think we've done well on that. With the refugee crisis, I think we have learned a lot, because of course there was always this criticism, Fortress Europe, but there was no Fortress Europe. There was no way to safeguard that the rules at the border are really implemented the way they should. Now we have a build-up of Frontex. We have a system in place relatively quickly first on a bilateral basis to help the smaller countries that were overwhelmed with the refugee influx. Also to see how we can do better border controls, but also help in refugee camps, and then see that those in need who need to be replaced because they have to be too long in a refugee camp or whatever reason, that this is organized in a certain way to avoid human trafficking, which is an important point too. So I think now looking back, we have become much better doing it, but there are many challenges, in particular also for Italy, I think, for Greece. Turkey has had a huge burden all these years with having to absorb most of the refugees. Many refugee camps weren't well enough financed. We had cut the funding so much. No wonder that they had left. So this is at the reactionary level, I would say, something that was done, and in parallel, of course, trying to find a way for peace. It's just that not always those who deal with the consequences are able to contribute to the solution as much as they wanted to.
Finally, a question about the future. In the UK, the Foresight Commission established by former Prime Minister Tony Blair is charged with the job of looking at the impacts of all social policy looking out towards the year 2075. Could I invite you, perhaps with your ambassadorial crystal ball, to think about, say, the next even 20 years in terms of Australian-German relationships, in terms of your work here in this country and the work of your colleagues at the embassy? What would you most like to see? How would the development and deepening of that relationship best occur, do you think?
I think in both our countries the state plays a limited role, and we can set the policy framework which is done here. Now, of course, this has to be filled, and it's a task not only of the government, of everybody. So the universities, for example. We've just had 17 universities from Bavaria coming over here, trying to find partners. And then they can do it alone. They can exchange students in their practical year. We try now to link them with companies so that if they have to do an internship of 6 months or 1 year anyway, why not do it abroad? That's our German policy. And we can take in an Australian student for the same time, and there will be knowledge exchange. If you look at research, already now Australian researchers are working in the European Horizon 2020 programs. We will continue and build up on that. Companies, German companies are global anyway, so are Australians. It's just now there is a real task. If you look at the global discussion or the discussion in Germany, they are focused towards Asia Pacific. This is mostly China, or maybe now coming up India. And they just don't look at Australia. So we need to focus attention on Australia, and that's what we can do with our activities to spread the word about the fantastic possibilities. And I see tremendous potential in the health sector because Australia has some great inventions, and I think also the capacity to be very helpful in the region with these inventions.
Ambassador Prince, thanks very much for joining us on Europe Now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.